which came onto the scene in 320 A.D., nearly 300 years later. Ninth, the early Christian fathers were well acquainted with what Josephus wrote, yet neither Justin Martyr, Tertullian, Clement of Alexandria, Origen, Cyprian, nor any other Christian leaders ever quoted Josephus as their witness in their controversies with Jews and pagans. Indeed, Origen, in his work entitled Contradictions, Volume 1, page 47, says expressly that Josephus, who mentioned John the Baptist, did not recognize Jesus as the Messiah. That alone is powerful evidence. 10th, the famous historian Gibbon, who wrote the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, claims the passage is a forgery, as do many theologians. And lastly, the works of Josephus are voluminous and exhaustive. They comprise 20 books. Whole pages are devoted to petty robbers and obscure seditious leaders. Nearly 40 chapters are devoted to a single king. Yet the great Jesus is dismissed with a dozen doctored lines. In summary, there is more than enough information to prove the passage is a fraud and lacks credibility. The second most famous historian who is often quoted by believers in a real Jesus is the Roman Tacitus. After relating what measures were taken by the Roman Emperor Nero to lessen the suffering brought about by the great fire at Rome in 64 A.D., and to remove traces of it, Tacitus states on page 44 of volume 15 of his work entitled Annals the following, quote, "But neither the aid of man, nor the liberality of the prince, nor the propitiations of the gods succeeded in destroying the belief that the fire had been purposely lit." In order to put an end to this rumor, therefore, Nero laid the blame on and visited with severe punishment those men hateful for their crimes, whom the people called Christians. He from whom the name was derived, Christus, was put to death by the procurator Pontius Pilate in the reign of Tiberius. But the pernicious superstition, checked for a moment, broke out again not only in Judea, the native land of the monstrosity, but also in Rome, to which all conceivable horrors and abominations flow from every side and find supporters. First, therefore, those were arrested who openly confessed. Then, on their information, a great number who were not so much convicted of the fire as of hatred of the human race were arrested also. Ridicule was poured on them as they died, so that clothed in the skins of beasts, they were torn to pieces by dogs or crucified or committed to the flames. And when the sun had gone down, they were burned to light up the night. Unquote, Tacitus. The major reasons this passage does not prove Jesus lived are the following. First, the worshippers of the sun god Serapis were also called Christians and could be those referred to. Serapis, or Osiris, had a large following at Rome, especially among the common people. Second, in no other part of his writings did Tacitus ever refer to Christians or Christ. Third, Tacitus says the Christians had their denomination from Christ, which could apply to any one of many other so-called Christs who were put to death in Judea, as well as to Jesus Christ. Fourth, in all the Roman records, there is to be found no evidence that Christ was put to death by Pontius Pilate. This passage from Tacitus, if genuine, is the most important piece of evidence in pagan literature. Yet there is no trace of it anywhere in the world before the 15th century. How could it have been overlooked for 1,300 years? Fifth, most scholars admit that the works of Tacitus have not been preserved with any degree of accuracy. Six, the text refers to a great multitude, which is opposed to all that we know of the spread of the new faith in Rome at that time. A vast multitude of Christians in Rome in 64 AD? Hardly. There were not more than a few thousand Christians 200 years later. Seventh, it is inconceivable that the followers of Jesus formed a community in Rome at that time of sufficient importance so as to attract public attention and the ill feeling of the people. Eighth, death by fire was not a form of punishment inflicted at Rome in the time of Nero. It is opposed to the moderate principles on which the accused were then dealt with by the state. The use of Christians as living torches, as Tacitus describes, and all the other atrocities that were committed against them, have little believability and probably come from an imagination exalted by reading stories of later Christian martyrs. Ninth, the Roman authorities had no reason to inflict special punishment on this new faith.